Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books. Today we're talking about the layoffs hiding secrets over at Disney. I don't really trust Bob Chapek. I don't think he's serious. I don't think he is a good communicator. I don't think he's a leader. I think it's hard to trust somebody who destroys the Disney brands, all of them so really beloved for so many years, doesn't seem to think two things about it, doesn't listen to fans, just does whatever he thinks needs to be done without communicating with people. Now, on top of this, a couple months ago, 2 months ago, I did this video. This is about Dan Loeb, who is a billionaire investor. He put $1 billion into Disney. He had investments with Disney in the past and said he wanted to have layoffs at Disney and he wanted to shake up the board. He wanted them to sell ESPN. So he brought up a lot of things. But one thing he did stress is layoffs. We never heard anything about the layoffs again until just recently when Disney put out a sneaky memo. Why is it a sneaky memo? Well, because just a few days prior, Disney had this major quarterly report, their fourth quarter report. They talked to the financial analysts. They reported on their results. They admitted that streaming is looking disastrous. It's horrendous. However, somehow they said, hey, everything's going in the right direction. Don't worry about it. We're going to be profitable by 2024 with our streaming service. So that doesn't really make sense, because the losses keep getting to be more and more. But what even more doesn't make sense is, hey, if a few days ago you were just having this public conference talking about your fourth quarter results, making a little mention that you're going to revise your costs or whatever, you didn't mention this memo? You didn't mention the items in this memo that you're going to have massive layoffs probably? You said you're going to look at all of the cost structure. You're restricting business travel. You're restricting employees' ability to go to business conferences. You're going to be looking and scrutinizing all of your expenses and content and overhead. This is what Warner Brothers Discovery is doing, which they've been very open about ever since before the merger. They said they were going to have massive cuts, and they were talking about them categorically. And Warner Brothers Discovery has been talking numbers. They've been saying, well, we've already reduced 11% of our overhead. We're hoping to get to 20% by the end of this year. We have some additional cuts we're looking to add. I mean, they're giving out numbers. They're answering questions about the cuts, but no, not Bob Chapek. Bob Chapek goes ahead and has his fourth quarter report, says that everything's going great, even though they're losing all this money in streaming, kind of a record amount for streaming. And, doesn't take any questions about what they're doing because he did it the week following. So what is that? What's actually going on over there? I think there's a lot going on over there. I think it's a lot worse at Disney than just them losing a fortune at streaming. When I saw these streaming numbers, and I haven't been inside and outside Disney financials and all that a lot, I've looked at them somewhat. I follow Warner Brothers Discovery very closely. I follow Disney at a distance. So when I first saw these numbers, though, on the losses of streaming, it occurred to me, this is a lot of money to lose. A lot of money to lose. Because for one thing, they didn't just start their streaming service. When you start a business, it's normal to have a lot of losses up front because you're not in the flow of things. You have to set things up. You don't have your efficiencies together. But they've been doing this business since before there was a Bob Chapek. This wasn't launched by Bob Chapek. It was launched by Bob Iger. So how could they be accumulating all of these incredible losses? Doesn't really make sense. And then I was thinking, well, things happen. They can spend a lot of money on marketing. They could spend money on buying a lot of content. And, they want to get more people to spend more time on the platform. So that means they need more shows and they need to find more people. Okay, there's advertising, there's expenses, there's expenses of production, but not this much. I mean, this is $4 billion in losses in just 2022. So looking at just this chart, to me it said, well, I think that they're having losses in other divisions, and somehow the losses are winding up being stuck into streaming. So how would you do something like that? And why would I think that? The reason I would think that is these losses can't just be attributable to streaming. It's just too much money to lose that much money. Even though they're spending wild amounts of money on production. She-Hulk, $25 million per episode. So just $225 million just on She-Hulk. But not just She-Hulk. Supposedly, WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, $25 million per episode. Do you think those Star Wars shows come cheap, or do you think they're also probably $25 million per episode? And where did they come up with this flat number, by the way, of $25 million per episode? What kind of budget is that? Now, while Netflix has paid a lot of money for Stranger Things in recent episodes, when Netflix was doing Marvel projects, they were paying Marvel $200 million for 60 episodes. So anywhere from 3 to 3.3, whatever, million per episode, not $25 million per episode. Are Marvel's new shows really that much better? Are they really worth, 8 times the amount? The Defenders apparently cost as much as $8 million per episode. But how could you possibly justify spending $25 million an episode on Moon Knight and $3 million an episode back in the day with Netflix on Daredevil? I mean, I understand the cost of things has gone up, but not that much. The answer is this. The money that they are losing is more than just in the streaming service. And it's a lot more, to me, this is just my insight. It's a lot more than this $1.47 billion in this last fourth quarter. And I'm going to tell you why. The reason why the numbers are actually much worse is all of the production of all of the shows that they're spending all of these $25 million at a show clip on are all coming from Lucasfilm, from Marvel Studios, ABC Studios does production as well for the shows, I believe. All that money, all that internal stuff, they take the expense of producing the show, and then they actually charge a profit as if they were to sell it to Netflix, as if they were to sell it to Apple or outside the company. They put a profit on top of all their production expense, which includes all of their overhead, plus the extra profit margin they put on top of it, and then they pass it to the streaming service. They actually have this thing called intra-segment revenue, which is when our TV production studio, let's say Lucasfilm or Marvel, produces a $25 million show. It doesn't mean it really costs $25 million to produce. It really means maybe it's, let's say, for the sake of argument, $20 million to produce, and then they charge the streaming service an extra $5 million per episode. It's their own streaming service. So it goes from the left pocket and puts it into the right pocket. Well, that's how you can get what should be losses from the TV production unit for their efficiencies and their expenses passed to the streaming service because they're paying this markup as if they were two separate companies like they would charge Netflix. The other problem here is, let's say the $25 million didn't even include a profit for the production company, their own production company. Is She-Hulk really worth $225 million? And how many years are they stretching the cost of She-Hulk over? So there's a concept called amortization and depreciation. Disney uses what's called a straight line method. This isn't really unusual. Netflix takes 4 years. I think Disney takes about 10 years, which is to say that, and again, I don't have these exact numbers. I called a couple industry friends and I couldn't really get an answer before it was time to make this video. But I know that Netflix is very aggressive and assumes that if they spend X dollars in 1 year, that in 4 years, 90% of it they will assume has then become worthless, has been expensed out. If they spend $5 billion, $6 billion on Marvel and Star Wars shows, they're not, that $1.47 billion, this $4 billion in losses only sees about a quarter or maybe even as little as 10% of those expenses. So there's a lot more expense that's going to have to be paid for coming from all the money they're spending on these shows. So while they've lost $1.47 billion combined from streaming and the production unit, they've lost even more on what the expensing, the amortization is going to be over the next 4 to 10 years. And it's hidden right now. You can't see it. It's in there. The only way that they don't lose hundreds of millions, if not billions more, is if She-Hulk is really something that's in demand on Disney Plus. And those other expensive shows are really something people want to actually see. And if somehow the streaming service becomes viable at some point, because it's not viable. They say it's going to be viable probably in 2025 or whatever. I don't think it is, because their average revenue per user is a little less than $4. That's stretched internationally. In the United States, it's like a little over $6 per user. Netflix gets twice the money internationally and more than twice the money domestically. So you can't compare 120 whatever million Disney subscribers, Disney Plus subscribers, to 200 million Netflix subscribers, because they're getting less than half the money that Netflix is getting. So it's not really a viable business. The other thing is they're doing well with subscriptions. That's great. But at some point, the market taps out for that if they're able to even keep those subscribers. As they run out of subscribers to sign up, even if they were at Netflix's point right now, Would they have been breaking even? Yeah, if they had as many subscribers as Netflix, because look, here's their revenue, the direct-to-consumer revenue. They took in $19.5 billion for the year ended October and $16 billion the year before, which is not much of growth. But anyway, $19.5 billion, that's a lot of money. You still can't make this work on $19.5 billion? Even with all that amortization of all your costs that you're spreading over multiple years? So they must have, I don't know what in costs, maybe $8 billion or so hanging around out there of extra money they spent that they still think, oh, it still has some value in future years. So the thing, if you want to look at the numbers, this is from their fourth quarter report. Look at their elimination of intra-segment revenue. When they say elimination, they're still accounting for it, saying that they earned it, but because they earn it from themselves, they deduct it from the total unit because it's internal. It's something that the parent company owns all of it. But that's not to say that they don't overpay, which they do, to produce these shows at $25 million a show. I mean, come on. That's way too much money to spend on these shows. They have way too many shows. They're not good enough, and people are not interested enough in these shows for that to be viable. Tell me what you think about this in the comments below. I don't know if you were familiar with any of this. This is really what hit me when they said in the memo that they're going to do layoffs throughout the entire company. And by doing layoffs throughout the entire company, quote, those efforts will help us to both achieve the important goal of reaching profitability for Disney Plus in, fiscal 2024 and make us more efficient and nimble overall. So if they have layoffs at ABC Studios, if they have layoffs at Marvel Studios, if they have layoffs in their parks divisions and all the other parts of Disney, ESPN, Freeform, FX, National Geographic, the Disney Channel, all these other places, somehow that's going to make it profitable to operate the streaming service? I understand in the streaming service, I understand layoffs there. I don't understand unless you're moving costs from your production units into the streaming service, hiding the losses in the streaming service, or if you're either deliberately or maybe accidentally overpaying for these expenses. If you see where I'm going with this. What this all adds up to is, if Bob Chapek is wrong, if Kareem Daniels is wrong, that these shows that they're spending all this money on are not really as great as they think they are. They're not really hits. People aren't going to be signing up and retaining their subscriptions so they get to see more episodes again and again, repeat episodes of She-Hulk in the future. Then their assumptions of the value of this stuff are off, and they're worth a lot less than they think that they're worth. The company, the shows, their assets altogether. And this stuff, it can go on for a couple of years, but it always winds up catching up with companies. Could be a disaster for Disney. The number one thing that makes me think that this is incredibly sketchy and inappropriate is that they leaked this memo instead of discussing these issues publicly and openly when they just had their fourth quarter results call, allowing themselves to be asked questions by experienced financial analysts who really know how to analyze this specific company. They follow it very carefully for the investors that they provide investing information to. So let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. I could certainly be wrong, but let me know what you think. Maybe I'm right. Let me know what you think of Bob Chapek altogether, if you think he should be trusted, if you think his judgment's good. Please do let me know though. So please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up when you like it. And I will see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.